Hey everyone, I'm Mike Del Preti, and you're listening to Context, the podcast where I'm talking to leaders in real estate about what's going on in the space. So today I'm joined by Meyer Toolson, president of Sell Direct and Services over at Opendoor. Hey Megan.
Hi Mike, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, no, it's awesome that you were able to come in. Another great day here in Boulder, and looking forward to having you chat with my students afterwards.
Yeah, me as well.
Super. All right, so the question I kind of like to ask everybody is, how do you typically start your day?
Well, I start my day these days with a walk outside. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, where it's lovely about 8 months of the year, and we're lucky enough to have a bunch of trails. So I take my dog for a walk. And then after that, I check my metrics. I'm an operator, so I like to start my day with what has happened in the business the day before, but also the context to help me know how am I pushing when I get into my meetings for the rest of the day.
Okay. Is there any kind of one or two metrics in particular that you're always zeroing in on these days?
How many sellers did we serve yesterday?
Yeah.
How many were excited about our product?
Yeah.
And then I check my sleep every day. I have an Oura ring. And so one of the things I also start with is, did I get enough of the right balance the day before? And what does that mean in terms of how I manage myself today?
Yeah, that's great. Are you working remotely?
Mixed. I travel quite a bit. So I'm on the road maybe 2 weeks of the month to the cities that we operate in. We're in about 50 cities. And I go to San Francisco pretty frequently. And we have an office in Tempe, so I get to go to that office and be with our sales team there.
Okay, that's great. Good mix. Good mix. So how long have you been at Opendoor?
About 9 years now, actually. So, better part of a decade.
Wow.
Yeah, long time.
And it's my understanding that you've had every single job at Opendoor in those past 9 years.
Not quite. I have not touched legal, capital markets. There's some important things that are, better left untouched.
Do you want to tell us about that career trajectory and what that looked like why you joined and kind of how you progressed over those 9 years?
Yeah, absolutely. I joined initially not really fully understanding the extent of what I was taking on, I would say. I was at another startup in San Francisco and personal friends with Eric Wu and our first head of operations, Ryan Johnson, and was having brunch with them, and they were telling me about the product. And I had grown up in real estate. My dad's a land developer, and it resonated for me how magical the product was. And said, well, maybe we should talk. Let's talk about it. And so went in for an interview, which was weird, with friends that I'd known for, at that point, a very long time. And they eventually gave me an offer and said, okay, well, do you want to work on renovations, which I knew nothing about, or accounting, which I knew very little about? And I said, well, probably renovations. And of course, at that stage, you wind up doing both, right? So not really a choice, just what you're doing that day.
How big was the company at that point? How many employees?
It was, 15 to 20.
Wow.
So small. We were working above a bar in Soma in San Francisco. And it was awesome. It was really fun. It was, I showed up and Ryan pointed me towards the laptop they purchased and not set up and said, figure that out and figure out how to get email and just figure it out. And when you're done, could you tell us if we've made any money on the homes we've bought so far?
Why did you choose renovations with no experience in that space?
Oh, I thought it was going to be like home and garden television. Truly, I thought it was going to be, big transformations and taking out walls. It was going to be an HGTV show. It was nothing like that.
No?
Of course, no. Yeah, actually, the first thing I did when I arrived was I understood how much we were putting, call it $30,000 into every home. And it's not really the business model to do that, right? The business model is to bridge the timing gap and the expectation gap between sellers and buyers, but not to build a new house for that buyer. And so said, oh, this is not what we're trying to do here as a platform. We need to scale that back and essentially strategize myself out of a job and reset what we're doing there. But it was nothing like home and garden television that I was anticipating.
And I mean, fast forward to today at scale, renovations generally kind of new carpet, new paint?
Most of it, right? Again, bridging the expectation gap, right? It's a seller who's lived in that house for a decade, roughly, and hasn't fixed that back sprinkler for the past 6 years, and really doesn't want to fix the back sprinkler for the new owner when they didn't do it for themselves. Yeah. And we come in and say, okay, we're going to fix that back sprinkler. And also, when you moved out, there are a bunch of things in the walls. Well, we need to repaint, freshen up, and often carpet doesn't have a 10-year lifespan, or barely has a 10-year lifespan.
Right.
So replacing those kind of deferred maintenance things, making it sparkling clean and fresh for the new buyer to move in.
Yeah. Is there a commonality you've seen across customers that sell to Opendoor?
I would say customers that desire simplicity and certainty, and there's really two segments there. There's the contingent buyer who cannot actually qualify for the next home without an offer or contract on their existing home. And they're looking for certainty of what they can afford. Like, what is my buying power? I don't want to get over my skis. And before I go shopping, really, I want to make sure that I know what I'm shopping for and that I can afford it when I move in. So that's category one. And the second is a convenience seller who is typically a big family, lots going on, typically a little bit older kids that have their own activities. We find people with more than one pet often. And the disruption of listing your home is really a barrier in their life. And so want a simple process to move on to their next stage of life.
Right. So bridging the financial gap and the convenience factor. And that's what I think in my mind. I'm like people with kids and people with pets.
Right.
Interesting. All right. So renovations, then what? After you strategized yourself out of a job?
My next official role was as the general manager of Phoenix. So we were only operating in Phoenix at the time. And what we found was we divided the work up into, we have a seller product, we've got pricing, we have to price the homes correctly, we have to make sure we're renovating the homes correctly, we have to work with new buyers and make sure they can get into the homes and evaluate them. And so we had all these different components, but we weren't bringing it together effectively for the Phoenix customer. And so my role was to bring all of those pieces together and start to write the playbooks for how it might work. Why does it work this way in Phoenix and why might it work differently in another market? And from there, we started expanding first to Dallas and then to some other markets.
How often do you update those playbooks?
All the time, constantly. It's not just, you learn things, right? You learn, okay, well, that worked really well for 70%, and here's a new process that we can deploy for 30% and just improve the overall system and process. And then seasonality changes things, macro environment changes things. And we have seen some evolution in the customer segments as well, I would say, especially as we've gotten more brand awareness, things land differently with customers than they did initially.
Interesting. I mean, without giving away any trade secrets, is there one kind of learning or update you could share? Or a theme?
I'll say, a theme is trust, right? So very early days, we heard a lot of, is this a scam? Like, what is this? Is this a scam? And we actually thought we didn't have product market fit initially, which is, I don't know that anybody wants this product. They think we're a scam. And we borrowed the brand of a title company, Fidelity, I think, and said, okay, we're going to put escrow deposit immediately, more than is the typical amount. And that this is trusted because this is a title agency, right? Like, it's not the counterparty. And as things have progressed, we've seen that, with more trust, consumers are more willing to try things with us. So during COVID, we switched to a fully virtual inspection program, and a lot of hesitancy internally, like, can we trust them? Can they trust us? Like, how is this going to work? And we found that we had a little bit more of a halo of like, oh, let's give this a shot with our consumers because we built trust over time to make that possible.
How do you build trust with consumers?
Well, you do a good job every time, right? Consistency. I am a complete nerd and will try to make anything an equation. So we think of trust as predictability combined with familiarity and then divided by self-orientation, which is do the same thing do I know how I can count on you, or can I predict how your behavior will be? Have I seen enough of that to feel like I'm confident in it? And am I familiar with you? And then are you acting in your best interest, or are you acting in my best interest, or somewhere in between, basically? And that's a divide, right? And so we think about all of those elements in terms of being really predictable, making sure we're showing up all the time. And that some of that is just, brand media, right? Like just making sure that we're present. And then being clear and transparent about when we're a counterparty and when we're just giving advice, right? We're just sharing, well, here's how you might think about that.
Yeah.
And occasionally doing things that are not in our best interest and say, that is actually trust building.
Right. As you mentioned that, I'm thinking about, I can't remember, one of the market crashes when Opendoor probably could have canceled a whole bunch of contracts and shot yourself in the foot from a brand perspective. But it sounds like you made that decision to just eat the cost.
Yep.
This is going to hurt short term, but long term, it's the right decision.
Absolutely. Our brand stands for certainty.
Right.
And if you can't count on the certainty in that moment when you need it the most, then what are we even doing here?
Yeah.
And so it was an incredibly expensive decision, and I can say certainly hotly debated, because the contract is the standard real estate contract, right? So there are exit clauses, and we decided not to use them, even if we legally could have.
And you would have been exiting hundreds, thousands.
Thousands. Yeah, yep. Like 15,000, something like that.
And that would have been great for the quarter, but 5 years, not worth it.
It would have been short-sighted, right? Especially given what we're trying to deliver to customers, which is you can count on us, and that's predictable. It's not when it's in our interest, or it's not when it's convenient. You can count on us consistently.
Right. All right, so after general manager of Phoenix, then what?
Well, I bounced around to various parts of that system that we talked about. So you've got to price the homes well. You've got to have a great experience for sellers. You have to have a great experience for buyers. You have to have renovations. So next stop was pricing, and then I worked on the buyer product for a while, and that was my hardest role. It was challenging.
Yeah.
And then spent some time with Merav Block, an incredible executive, working on expansion, taking that show on the road to now 50 cities, but our biggest kind of push was the first 6 cities and then the next 12 cities over a course of a couple of years. And over time, it eventually consolidated where instead of, it was lateral for a very long time, and then suddenly it wasn't lateral, right? It was absorbing more and more pieces of the business into one organization and took over customer success and marketing, and then eventually product and design.
Was that a purposeful career trajectory that you took, just kind of going to all these different parts of the business?
Not at all. No, it was I believe deeply in the mission of the company, and I, in my bones know it will succeed. And so when something would go wrong, and if I felt like I had the skill set to help, which is just, structuring and, providing kind of what do we do next and a little bit of strategy, I would either raise my hand or somebody would tap me on the shoulder and I'd say, great, let's give it a shot.
Yeah.
And, all lateral moves for many years until eventually started to be a bigger job. I was promoted to chief customer officer right out of COVID or right when we went public in early 2021. And then last year to president.
Awesome. And then you mentioned the buyer product being the hardest. Why was that the hardest?
I think I didn't understand why at the time. I think there's a few reasons now in hindsight. Number one is that is more of a product role than it is an operations and strategy role. And product requires a lot of visual design, and I'm just not a particularly visual person. And so that was challenging for me. More structurally, I think the buyer side is, I'll quote one of my colleagues, Carrie Melcher, who says, buying is romance and selling is finance. And I'm not that romantic. I just am not. You can ask my husband. But the capabilities of our organization are more self-serve in nature, more here's a product that we think you're going to love for great reasons. And we're not in the business of the hand-holding and the kind of day-to-day support. That's the role of the agent, and we think that that's a very critical role of the agent. And so I didn't internalize how much we didn't have that capability, and it was really critical for the buyer side of the equation.
Does Opendoor currently have a buyer product?
We do. We have a direct buy platform where you can purchase homes directly from Opendoor, certain price, so no bidding, no bidding wars. If you want it, you say, I want it, click add to cart, metaphorically speaking, sort of. And we also have obviously serve buyers via our marketplace product.
Okay. All right. So you've had this 9-year trajectory through the ranks of Opendoor, doing all this different stuff. If you could kind of give yourself some advice when you started that journey now, what would it be?
I have a lot of ideas on that. I think the most critical would be to celebrate the progress, even if it's not perfection, because over time that progress compounds and it can be something that you're really proud of, or something we say sometimes is a little bit of slope makes up for a lot of y-intercept, and really focus on driving the slope and not always get hung up on where we are from a y-intercept standpoint.
Interesting.
All the math is just,
Yeah, no, I should have expected an equation as an answer. I like that. So the past couple of years have been a little bit crazy, in the markets. The markets changed a bit. How did Opendoor react to the changing environment?
Well, just to start with a little bit of context on the macro, and this is a once in 40-year pace of interest rate increases, absolutely phenomenal pace. And the dislocation that we saw in the real estate market on the other side was something we'd not seen before, in that we went from higher highs than we'd ever seen down to lower lows. And it looked much more like 2008, which a lot of people thought would never happen again, than it did like any of the prior recent cycles, COVID or the 2018 mini cycle, than we had seen. We saw about 450 basis points of reduction in home price appreciation between peak to trough in just a few months, which is basically exactly what 2008 looked like. So really intense. But when the dust settled, real estate wasn't frozen, right? A lot of people are saying like people are, everybody's on the sidelines and it's frozen and people are stuck. But 4 million people moved in 2023.
Right.
And that's because real estate is about is generally driven by life transitions. You're getting married, you're having another kid, you need a bedroom for that third kid who's now 2, or you have a parent that's moving in and you need a different type of space. And those things don't wait for the Fed to change interest rates, like they happen.
Right.
And so we leaned into how do we serve better those 4 million, those 4 million individuals, and did a few things. We personalized and improved the quality of the product. We deepened our partnership relationship so we could really meet our sellers where they were. And we worked hard on our cost structure, our unit costs in particular, so that we could lower the price of our product and serve more customers with something that was more affordable for the magic that it delivered. And the combination of those, I would say, we think was pretty successful in 2023. We more than doubled our market share last year, focusing on really serving well those 4 million customers that still needed to move.
Yeah. From the outside looking in the past year, it seems like this phrase is overused now, but a back to basics approach.
Focus, simplicity, back to basics, just do it really well. Do the few things really well.
But you're also, the company is not hibernating, right?
Absolutely not.
Ads during Super Bowl and spending a lot of money direct to consumer. There's a lot of that you're still doing. You're not just waiting for winter to thaw.
No, 4 million people moved last year. We are serving those customers and we are improving the product, and we're well positioned for a growth in the industry again, but we are also well positioned to continue to grow whether or not macro conditions change.
You mentioned something, meeting customers where they are. Was there some sort of learning or aha moment internally where you made a significant shift towards that?
I would say early stage, we were maybe a little arrogant about what customers wanted and thought of it in terms of a bunch of San Francisco folks, what would we want? Or, I can't stand it when somebody calls me, calling without an appointment or, without a calendar invite. I'm like, it's my sister. I'm like, what are you doing? It's the middle of the day. And I think we have imposed maybe too many of our own preferences. And what we found is that our partners are incredibly complementary in terms of our skill set and partner skill set. So we'll use home builder as an example, which is, I'm a customer that wants to purchase a new build property. I go into the sales center and I don't know what I can afford. I literally can't sign the contract because I have a contingency on my current mortgage, so I can't even start the process to build the home. And I've got 9 months basically between today and when that home's going to be ready, where I don't know if I am going to be able to live in my house the whole time. I don't know how long it will take me to sell. I don't know if I'm going to have to move in with my in-laws for a period of time, which a lot of people have had to. And what Opendoor provides is you go in that sales center and in a matter of minutes, you can actually know exactly what you can afford, be confident of your close date. We can be flexible, move that around if the timeline of the construction moves, which happens all the time, and you actually have a seamless experience. And so incredibly complementary relationship between the home builder and Opendoor.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think the industry is so slow to change?
That's the $2 trillion question, if anybody ever had one. I think there's real structural barriers to innovation in real estate. People will talk about, it's cyclical, it's super fragmented, it's regulated at the local, state, and national level, right? Tons of things to think through. I think fundamentally, though, this is something people do once a decade. And it's something they do once a decade with all of their money and the place that their children sleep.
Right.
And so you're not super apt to take a big risk with something like that. Mm-hmm. And so there's slow adoption for new models in a totally rational way, given the magnitude and the impact that transaction has on people's lives. It's also what makes the job so interesting, right? Is innovating in such an important moment actually is just incredibly meaningful. I would say, and there has, compare us to other countries, it's not like there's been no innovation. Zillow, Redfin, Realtor brought all of this information online for consumers 15 years ago, right? And that foundation of customers have all the information they need to buy the best property for them and know what's right, and it's in their hands, has been a foundation for a lot of innovation I think we've seen over the past decade. There's innovation in financing, both for purchase and resale, innovation in trade-ins, how do I make sure I line up those move dates so it's seamless for me? And then obviously, just to give you the sales pitch, you can sell your home directly to Opendoor online in a few clicks.
Oh, really? What website do I go to do that?
Opendoor.com.
Oh, okay. This podcast brought to you by Opendoor. Do you have any psychologists on staff?
We should, but not formally, no.
Okay. Are there any products that you've built, not the big mainline ones, but are there any products you built you just wish had greater adoption?
What we see is there's a really diverse range of preferences for consumers in all of the different avenues. Like, how do you want us to communicate with you? Simply between like email and text even, right? Or phone call. How quickly do you want to move? How much are you trying to maximize price? And so I don't think there's a particular product. I think I'd love for the industry to start building a broader set of features so consumers have more options and we offer a more personalized, better experience for a diverse set of preferences.
And is that the agent as the last mile that's responsible for educating consumers on all that?
I think it's a really important role of the agent, and that the agent is at your kitchen table and on your side, honestly, in a way that counterparty can't be, right? And you want consumers to have all the information to make the best possible choice. And that guidance from somebody that doesn't do it once every 10 years, but actually does it all the time, that's their full-time job, I think is incredibly valuable.
Do you want that person to be wearing an Opendoor polo shirt to getting a paycheck from Zillow, or would you prefer it wearing an Opendoor polo?
I think ideally the product speaks for what, the customer that it works for best, right? Yeah. And so it might be right for that person to be wearing a Zillow polo one day with a certain customer and a Opendoor product the next day with a different customer, which is, we want the product to be magical for the right customer and don't want to force it on a customer that it's not magical for.
Okay. If you were to start a seed venture fund today, what kind of companies in the real estate space would you invest in?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that I'd be a very good investor. I'm much more of the operator, let's go get it done type. I would say there's tons of interesting things going on in the intersection of fintech and prop tech. I think that's fascinating to invest in. And then I think the 3D printing of homes, like all of the construction tech stuff is really fascinating and has a ton of opportunity still to really change the way people live in their homes, and that you can have more standardized construction, more consistency of construction, and therefore higher quality.
Yeah. So if you had to leave Opendoor and go to another company and you were going to be the CEO, running this whole thing, is there another company in the space you'd love to have a crack at? Or that you would find personally interesting or fulfilling?
I don't think so. I'm very passionate about what we're doing, delivering simplicity and certainty to sellers. I moved a ton as a kid, right? When what's happening in the family is a life transition that brings its own stress, lots of excitement, but often stress. And at the same time, you have this process that is incredibly stressful, that's onerous and complicated, and it's being imposed on you. The ability to just take all of that away and say, we got you. This is handled, no problem. You move on and focus on the exciting part, the baby or whatever the life transition is, and let us handle this gnarly part. I think that's really magical.
Is that where your passion comes from, kind of moving around a lot as a child, or is it something else?
I think partially, yeah. And then I get to talk to customers all the time, right? So maybe that was the start and why the product resonated so much for me in the early days. But over the years, I get to talk to customers constantly and hear from them that sentiment, which is, this was magical. This actually enabled me to move when I wouldn't have moved otherwise. This actually enabled me to get closer to my job, so I'm not doing a 2-hour commute both ways, and get some of my life back.
So how and when do you talk to customers? How do you fit that into your busy schedule?
Well, often it's an escalation. So, something is not working like the way it should work, and I like to call that customer and understand it better so that I can understand what went wrong in the system. Mm-hmm. And then we do a lot of research, right? We do a lot of help us understand, did this make sense? Help us understand this new thing that we're thinking about. Would you ever consider that? And so in that context as well.
That's really great. You think that's a critical part of being able to do a good job in your role?
I think absolutely. It's a lot of consistency of the stories, but it's motivating, right? It's absolutely motivating to hear what works and what doesn't. And then it gives me context and insight, as much as I love checking my metrics every morning, it gives me as much context and insight for what do we need to deliver as the hard numbers do.
So we just finished up this hub event like we were talking about before we hit record over the past couple of days. And one topic we were talking about was just companies generally staying in their lane, right? Mm-hmm. As an entrepreneur, it's so exciting to think about new. I think as human beings, most of us or many of us are wired to think about, oh, we could do this, we could do that. Being in the position you've been in, you see the whole thing. And I'm sure you have many whiteboards that are mapping out all the inefficiencies and whatnot. How do you think about managing focus?
It's been a big topic for us, especially over the past 2 years, I'd say, because there's so much that there's so much opportunity in real estate. There's so much opportunity to digitize, to offer simple, more certain experience. At the end of the day, we go back to what is our superpower and why are we positioned to do this well versus what's currently being served in the market. So we bring local operations expertise. We bring a lot of data science. That's something that fintech and data science, risk management, the chain system of all of that, including the capital markets component. So does it involve those superpowers to uniquely solve that problem? If not, is it really our position?
Is that the equation to figure out if you should be doing something new?
That's my equation, yes.
Awesome. Does everyone generally listen to you, or is there kind of a good, healthy discussion of these things when an opportunity comes up?
Always a discussion, absolutely. Yeah. And the challenge is a lot of these things are when, not if, right? Which is, or just great ideas, right? So many amazing ideas that certainly pencil from an expected net present value standpoint, great opportunities. And having to say, okay, well, is that the one we want to do right now? Or is that something that we could wait for later? Is it actually perishable? And is it really unique to us, or is it just a good opportunity?
Yeah.
And those are challenging, great, heated debates.
Yeah. Love it. Mm-hmm. Kind of related to that, is there an opinion you hold that not many people agree with?
I don't like calls. Maybe said differently, which is, I think it's okay for us to predominantly have a self-serve with you can reach us when you want to, or we'll give you guidance, and we're only a touch away. There's a human a tap away, but you tap us as opposed to us proactively interjecting ourselves in your process, more of a pull instead of push in terms of communications. And I think that that's not everybody shares that, where the counter argument is that sellers want to feel like we want their business, right? And so how do you show, no, we really want your business without being intrusive?
Yeah. Why do you believe that so strongly?
Because I want us to have the right fit with the customer and not have somebody commit to work with us, or it's flexible, right? You can always get out of it because they feel some kind of pressure. You really want it to be, this is the right decision for me and my family. This is what we need to have the space to move on to the next chapter. Yeah. And that's a better experience, right? And ultimately we'll have better net promoter scores, better brand over time by delivering for the right customer.
Yeah. Okay. So you said you've listened to this podcast, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is there something you've learned?
Lots of things. I would say I was fascinated by the way Glenn at EXP thought about entrepreneurship and how do I empower everybody in the organization to be an amazing entrepreneur and do that with all of this. I'm going to bring all these skills, but ultimately you're the winner here. You're winning for yourself. And I thought that was really inspiring and love that. And yeah.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. Well, that's it for today. We are out of time. Megan, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I'm Mike Del Prete. You've been listening to Context. If you want to dive into more podcasts or check out some of my research, you can check out my website, mikedp.com. Or if you want to sell your house with a click of a button, go to opendoor.com. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you next time. Bye.